This is the Just Steph Show, and I'm your host, Steph Palermo, your Italian Boston girl who's an empath, healer, and all-around seeker of wisdom. Tune in weekly for advice on how to live your best life at work, home, or play so you can feel groovy every day. Hey, this is Steph Palermo. I'm your Sicilian Boston girl who drags you by your hair and shows you your best life, because that's what we're all aiming for, happiness and joy. So today, oh my gosh, I am so unbelievably thrilled. You can't imagine, because I told you all that I'm addicted to TikTok. So I found my new friend, Sven, Erlandson, and this, I don't even know, we don't have time for me to read everything that he is. He's amazing. He is a spiritual leader. He's the author of 6 best-selling books. He was born in North Dakota, and his office is out of Manhattan. He's with his he's a badass counselor, and he's with Badass Counseling, and he is a TikTok sensation. He's amazing. So I want you to watch one of these TikToks and see what he's got.
My girlfriend and I were having cocktails recently, and she told me that, Sven, you know, when I was in my teens and 20s and 30s, I always wanted what my parents had, that one relationship that lasts forever. But then as I've gotten older, especially into my mid-50s, I realized that if I would have gotten that, I would have missed out on all these great men that I've had in my life and everything that I've learned from them and how they have changed me in such amazing ways. That's some trippy shit. That's a reframing of life, when life basically says you had this thing that you always wanted. But then when you live with an open hand and you allow the universe to bring you everything that you never knew you always wanted, it's so much more than what you had been aiming for and directing for. But it requires allowing the universe in, allowing God or the soul to bring in far more than what you wanted. So let me ask you this. What is it that in the past would have been a curse that has ended up turning into the most amazing blessing in your life? Have a
Well, I'd like to welcome Sven on camera. Hey, hi, Sven. How are you?
Steph, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Truly, thank you.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled. Okay, where are you chopping wood?
We've got property, and so we have woods as part of our property. And so usually, if I'm outside chopping wood or clearing brush or taking trees down or whatever, I get out there, and then my brain starts going, you know how it is. And then I get ideas, and I'm like, oh shit, I gotta get this on camera or whatever. And so that's usually where I am. So if I have gloves on and an axe, yeah, I'm out on the back property.
You brought North Dakota to New York.
Yeah, well, I tell you though, I gotta clarify. I was only in North Dakota for the first 3 days of my life. After that, I fully grew up in Minnesota. But there is a part of me that does have a bit of my heart in North Dakota. It's a great state.
Minnesota, right?
Minnesota.
So tell us a little bit about Badass Counseling, because I want to hear a little bit about your story and how you got to this place where you're helping so many people, and you're out there, you're viral on TikTok, but you started somewhere, and how did you? And you have such an amazing resume, but you've done so much. So what's the short story?
The short story is simply this. My father was a pastor. 4 of my uncles were pastors, all Lutheran. And one of my uncles was a missionary to Ecuador. And my grandmother, she had started her own church back in the 30s, 40s. She told her country pastor to stick it, went off and started her church. And I grew up with that. And my mother was also a longtime spiritual counselor herself. So there's that. But then I grew up in a family of 5 brothers and 1 sister, and who was a very tough sister. And so this family of boys, and in sports and so forth, one of my brothers enlisted during the Vietnam War. And I went into the military for just a few years. And so there was this cross section, this fusion in my life from the very beginning of love of spirituality and soul and people, and then this other sort of side of just life and guys and athletics and busting your ass and working hard and in the gym and all that stuff. And those two things, for so many years, they didn't fit. They didn't fit. And then there's that thread running through all of it of my mother. I was largely raised by my mother. She wanted another girl, and so I was taught how to sew and darn my own socks and cook and garden and all of these things. And so there's this. But the biggest thing she taught me through her example, and that I cleave to more than anything, was this asking of deep questions. My mother was a very deep thinker, still is. She turns 93 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday.
She always asked, yeah, exactly. She always asked deep questions. So I come home from school, and she had made a coffee cake for each of us kids. We each get a piece, and you're always trying to steal part of your brother's piece. And I'd sit in the kitchen while she's prepping the next meal or whatever, and she's always asking these really freaking deep questions from a very young age. And so all of these things, the spiritual, the athletic guy, sort of rough and tumble world, and then the deep questions and all of that. And over time, I went to seminary, I became a Lutheran pastor myself, and I was writing books on how religion doesn't fit for America for a lot of people. My first book, I was the first author in America to name and delineate the spiritual but not religious movement in America. You can go on Wikipedia, it's there and so forth, spiritual but not religious. And it wasn't fitting. And while I had problems with religion myself and so on and so forth, I was a pastor, but there's still such a spiritual longing for that connection to self, connection to others, that connection to the universe, and finding words for that, and finding metaphors and symbols for that, because there is an innate human longing, but it has to be done in a different way. And so God, the universe, the gods, whatever, put me on this roller coaster of a life. And finally, in the 2000s, it began to all come into sort of synthesis. And so then, I wrote the books, and I've had a counseling practice for many, many, many years. And then that sort of morphed into corporate counseling. And even for a while, though, I had given up literally all of my life possessions, given up all of my bank account, and I was working among the homeless, literally living among the homeless for 2.5 years, sleeping on concrete every night. I'd given up everything. And so my path has taken me in many directions. And I've been greatly influenced by an incredibly deep spiritual mother and my mother's mother, very deep women in my history. And so finally, I just started doing what I do, speaking spirituality, but in regular people's terms and language. And my language is very salty. And a lot of people that turns off, but a lot of people, it's like, oh my God, finally somebody who's just talking straight.
Well, it's real.
So that's sort of the short version of it.
Yeah, it's real. And I think what you're saying is all this that you had going on, it would seem to everybody, to the world, that they're juxtaposed, but they can be enmeshed. I love that, because spirituality and the universe, God, cares about all aspects of our lives.
Indeed.
And so, and we can live that out. And you and I talked before. It's, I think you would agree that, this journey that we're on is a spiritual journey. Everything is about spiritual. And then there's the psychology part of sort of getting that together,
Yes. And the spirituality, and just to clarify for people, and I'm much more on the spirituality side simply because that's my background. That's my field of expertise. There are those that are so good on the psychology side and real experts, and I defer to their wisdom. But yes, there's so much overlap. Where does one start and the next end and so forth? But just to clarify for people, when I use this word spirituality, and I think you and I are sort of in synthesis on this sort of thinking, Steph, that spirituality, I'm not so much talking about, God and that sort of thing. And if people want to talk about that, if I have clients who want to talk about that, I'm fully fluent in that language. I have clients of all different religions. I have atheist clients. And so, but it's not about the God stuff. When I talk about spirituality, yes, it's that. Yes, it's connection to the universe, but it's connection with your own spirit, connection with the depths of your own soul. And I have come to believe over, 30 plus years, 35 years on my own deliberate spiritual journey, but 25 years of doing this work, plus all of my parents' decades and decades of expertise, that Spirituality is fundamentally about connecting with your own spirit and you're getting down to the depths of your own soul. And what obstructs that is all the BS, lies, fears, BS beliefs we were taught about ourselves and about life. All of that gets packed on top of it, all that crud, like heaping manure in there, all this crud. And you have to pull that out. All of that crud has to come out before I can fully connect with my true soul and my sense of who I really am. And that's what spirituality is. I have communion with my own spirit. And so much of the unrest and the unhappiness, not just in our culture, but in us as individuals, is that we're disconnected from my own spirit. And the final little piece on that is, I believe that down at the depths of who we really are, when I go to the depths of who I really am, when I pulled out all the crud, and yes, it can be done. For those of you that worry it can't, it can. And I do it with clients every day, and Steph does it with clients. But when you pull that out down there in that still small place deep inside is where my voice and the voice of the universe become indistinguishable. It's where the voice of God speaks to us from within, and it bubbles up. And sometimes it just comes as a ping, ping, like a ping on a sonar in a submarine, you know, like in the movies. And sometimes it comes up very strongly, and there's a powerful sense of feeling it and knowing it, but it comes from there. But we have to get the crud. And that's why so many of my videos and my books are about not just unlearning all the BS beliefs that we were taught, but also getting out the pain that goes with it. It's both. It's not just the pain. It's also the beliefs and putting words to the stuff that we were taught about ourselves and about life and so forth. So yeah, you and I are definitely in understanding on that. I think we both sort of think alike on that one, Steph.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people are angry with organized religion, and they don't realize that. I mean, even if you look at Psalm 119, it says, I will walk the ways of your commands after you enlarge in my heart.
Right.
Right. Your heart has to expand before you will follow the ways that, a way that's really your path, the right path, where you make choices for your higher self.
Amen. Amen. And in that vein, that's really a great point, Steph. In that vein, the other piece that's difficult for oftentimes, and I have incredible respect for religion when it's done well. I really do, regardless of the religion. I grew up in Christianity and Judaism in my experience growing up. But when it's done well, it can be a great thing. But one of the real problems is when someone, be they in religion or just an overbearing parent or an overbearing friend, presumes to know what God is calling someone else to do. And the way I think of it, and I write about this in my books, is that it's like when you were born, a chip, so to speak, was implanted in who you are. And everything in there is about you is encoded on that chip. What color hair you're going to have, or no hair, or what kind of flowers you're going to like when you're 12, what kind of food you're going to like when you're 42, what you're going to feel passionate about, what you're going to feel less passionate about. So I have friends who are very passionate about saving the world. I have friends who are very passionate about creating honorable businesses, not just running businesses, but having them be, honorable and not just always about the bottom line. I have friends who are passionate about, saving animals and so on and so forth. Everybody has different passions. My passion happens to be helping people in their most extreme, difficult problems in life, interpersonally with them or own selves, and then in a relationship. But the point is this. What God or the universe is calling me to do is very different from what God or the universe is calling Steph to do, or calling Susie, Bob, Jim, or Tony to. Right. And I can't tell Tony, and Susie can't tell Bill what their calling is or what they should be doing with their lives. Only I can know what I'm called to do. We can help another person get the crud out that's blocking that voice, but only Susie knows what Susie's voice is calling her to do. And that's why in so many of my videos and in my books and so forth, I keep hammering on this point that spirituality really boils down to courage. It boils down.
I was thinking that was what I was going to talk to you about next. I mean, this journey, and I find this even with the people that, the clients that I'm working on attracting, it takes a level of courage. It takes a level of courage to say, I'm going to see this through so that I can be happy. I'm going to ride this storm till I can get to the other side.
That's exactly right. And sometimes it's, I can't even see the other side. And sometimes it's just, I'm going to ride this storm, or I have to do this. In one of my videos, I talk about what I call the F it point. And I don't know what your swearing policy is on this show, so I won't expand on the title there. But where the pain of life gets so bad that all of a sudden, pain is an interesting thing, that it can get so bad that all of a sudden, just on today now, on the other side of that pain getting so bad, today I have courage to do that what just yesterday I couldn't do. I didn't have the courage. I wasn't there. Or a year ago, I would have never considered doing. So much of the spiritual journey is the courage, and it's the courage to go into myself and allow the pain out. So many people, and I know you know it in your work, so many people don't want to go into healing. They think they want it, and they do want it, but they're so terrified of everything that's inside, all the stored memories, and how each of those memories gets emotional charges attached to it. And they're afraid that if I start bringing that up, it'll overwhelm me. Whereas some people are afraid of even hearing what their voice is saying, because I know it would be calling me to something different than what I'm in right now. And some people can hear the voice and they've gotten the crud out, but they're afraid to actually act on it because they know exactly what their best friend will say, or they know exactly what their father will say, or society will say. And so it's terrifying. So that at every point along the way, at every point, and we're constantly looping through the cycle of the spiritual journey of hearing and acting and releasing. At every point, it requires courage. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. I always tell clients, the grand benefit of going through hell is that it's not as scary the second time. And it's definitely not as scary the third time. Whether it be a divorce, or getting fired from a job, or choosing a whole new career path, quitting this one and go this one, that once you've been through it the first time, if you've actually gone into it and gotten the pain out and so forth, the second time it's not quite as scary. And the third time it's like, oh, I've done this before. It's like, you know, the milestones, you know what to expect. But, and so the courage gets somewhat easier as you go along. And very often the hardest thing, the biggest thing that requires courage, this is, in my estimation, one of the top 3 most difficult things of anyone's spiritual journey. Saying no.
Oh, I know.
Saying no to that which is not me. Saying no to that which sucks my energy out of me. I have a stone wall in New England. We have these stone walls around our property from when they used to pull the stones out to be able to farm the fields. And I have a stone wall between myself and my neighbor, John. And that's a boundary. And I love John. I'd do anything for the guy. And he'd do anything for me, you know? And, but it's a boundary. Well, no is a boundary. And what that no means is, if you're going to transgress, if you're going to come across that boundary, you need my permission. No is an expression of myself. And people are afraid to say no because they're afraid, if I say no, you know, no, I don't want to serve on the PTA, or no, I don't want to go to such and such college, that you won't like me if I express part of who I am. What keeps people from living happy lives is they're terrified of putting their yeses out there, and they're terrified of putting their nos out there for fear of what you might think. You might leave me, you might get mad, you might criticize me, et cetera, et cetera.
You know, I found that, you know, I don't put myself in situations that I don't want to be in. And
Brilliant.
I
But you learned that one. You learned that the hard way, though, Steph.
I totally did. Oh, I totally did. You know, and then you feel bad and you have resentment and you have these other feelings that come up. But I'll tell you what, it bothers other people when you do that. They get bothered. And you have to be okay with that. You have to know that I'm sorry. Because I actually had a girlfriend sit here and say, oh, you put a wall up and you isolate. I said, oh, honey, no. I was taking care of me. I needed a time to go inside for a little while.
Yep.
You know,
and that's a really great point, Steph, because when you're in relationships where people know your spirit and that you're giving, and when they're giving in return, there's nothing wrong. They don't take offense when I say, listen, I need to check out for a bit. I have 3 or 4 really uber type friends in my life that I've picked up over the years, you know, Todd and Lisa and Jay. And you know, I can never, the thing about my relationship with Todd or with Lisa or Jay is I can't outgive them. Or my girlfriend, Karen, I can't outgive Karen. So if Karen says to me, Sven, I got to check out for today. I can't, I need to pull back. I'm like, dude, you do what you got to do. She's made so many investments into the deposits into the bank account of the relationship that pulling back, it's like, fuck, go for it, dude. Take a withdrawal, go for a week here. I'll pay for it, whatever. But when we're pulling back from someone and they take offense at it, my first thought, if that's happening with a client where they're saying, I'm pulling back from, Jill, and, Jill's getting all up in arms. And my first thought is, Jill's probably taking more from the relationship than she's giving. She's expecting, and that she doesn't allow for you to be yourself. And the fact that you're standing up and saying, no, I need to be myself. I have to draw this boundary. I said, that's great, because that's a sign you're growing. But that word no requires so much courage. Drawing those boundaries requires so much courage. But you know what's even harder than just drawing the boundaries? As you yourself just said, is doing it in the beginning.
Right.
Doing it with the people who are closest to us, who are expecting us to keep acting the way we've always been. Keep living with no boundaries, or with they could do anything. And that's why the beginning of the spiritual journey, the first few years, are always the hardest. But you know what? We come to that point very often when the pain has gotten so bad that we cross over that effort point, and that pain gives us the strength to say no. I was literally, listen to this, Steph, literally just this morning, I was in bed very, very early, and I scroll through comments and I can't respond to all of them. I mean, they're just literally hundreds of thousands, and I just can't get to them. But occasionally, one will strike my eye, or I'll hit a like or whatever. And I get people reaching out to me constantly, and I'm sorry to those who do. I just can't get to everybody, and I've got my company to run and so forth. But occasionally, on the rare occasion, I do for whatever reason, wherever I'm at that day. And there was one this morning, and this young woman way off in another part of the country saying, Sven, I'm 18, 19 years old, and I'm going to leave home in the next week or two or month, whatever it is. And there's just so much pain in my home. And I'm like, holy shit. Yeah. It's just like this kid, the guts to do that at 18. She didn't say she was going off to college. She was just getting out. She just had to get away. The guts. Oh, that inspires me when people have the courage to do those difficult things. And beginning at age 18 with a resounding no. I didn't have to say my first big no at 18. That didn't come till years later. She's like, wow, now that's a woman. I mean, that's wow. So I had to write her and say, kid, go for it. And I can't always do that. And there are plenty more great stories, but that one today, just like, wow, the courage. But it really underlines what we're talking about here. This notion that the spiritual journey, especially in the beginning, especially when you're pushing back, you're creating mental room in your soul, you're pushing away all those voices that have been running your life, what I call your external power sources. And when we begin to push those out, we're reclaiming our power, and we begin to have the internal power source, which was our original state. And that's where true happiness comes from.
Right. The original state. That's right. You know what? I'm going to ask you a question. I want to talk to you a little bit about toxic people, but I'm going to read this. I want to read this for our audience, and then we're going to roll in one more TikTok. So unlike psychology and most other counseling, I'm not in the business of getting you out of your problems and diseases and getting you to a state of normal. I'm in the business of getting you out of all that stuff and getting you to a place of joy, ecstasy about life, clarity, and inner peace, true aliveness. And that was your quote I took from your website. And that's the difference. It's not par. What you want, you want to be enjoying life like life is meant to be lived and experienced and fun and laughing and all of that. And people are just treadmill. And it's like, same. When I hear, same day, what is it? They say same old, I'm going, oh my God, does somebody have a gun for myself? So I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? No, today's amazing. And you know what? But It took me to get to here to be able to say that. So
that's right.
So Kristen, roll that TikTok if you wouldn't mind.
Did you know that about 95% of the time, anger is a secondary emotion, not a primary one? Anger, 95% of the time, is a reaction to pain. It's true. Either past pain, present pain, or future pain. Anger is a response to pain. It's basically, you hurt me, so now I'm mad at you and I'm considering hurting you. So what that means is, if you're one of these people who believes, oh, I only have anger inside of me, I don't have any pain or sadness inside of me, it's like, you're full of shit. You have no idea how wrong you are. And I get this from men a lot of women too, but I get this from men. Oh, I'm just fucking pissed. Yeah, because you consider it weak to look at the sadness and the pain. But until you get the pain and the fear and the sadness out of you, doesn't matter how much anger you get out of you. So do you got the courage? Have a kick ass.
I love it. It's awesome. I love everything you do. I'm addicted. Totally. It's awesome. But I want to ask you, because all this sort of segues into toxic people in our lives. How do we deal with, and I'm actually going to deal with this tonight in I'm going to get advice from you and I'm going to bring it to my audiences tonight. But there's people sometimes that are in our life that are toxic that we can't get rid of, because there are kids, there are mother, there's somebody. What do you do? Because we can walk away from people that are not, in our inner circle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, Steph. And that's one I see a great deal of. And whether it's people we can't very often push completely out of our lives, or some that we know they're toxic, but we don't want to. Whether it's because, hey, it's my mother, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Or, dude, this is my brother. Our parents are gone. This is my brother. This is the witness to my life. Yes, he's toxic, but I just can't. And so what I recommend, it's sort of the obvious solution. If you can't cut somebody out entirely, and yet who they are brings negativity, brings undermining of you, brings lack of trust, disrespect, anything that we might consider toxic, well, then how about just reducing? Start by reducing 1%. Start by giving yourself, and this is a big one. It may sound trivial or silly. Start by not answering their texts right away, or start by not picking up their call. I have one client, she comes back about once a year, and she's quite successful. And she says, we really got to the point where she had to give herself permission to not answer the phone when her brother called or when her mother called. And her mother was very, very condemning of the life she had chosen, and you should just marry, or you should just do this or that. And she stopped answering as frequently. She talked to her mother, so she went from twice a day to once a week, which was a massive change. And of course, her mother reeled against it, and so on and so forth. But what that gave was room to her own soul to breathe. She wasn't being inundated with her mother's raw sewage dumping onto her head every single day. So there's that. Another thing is geography. I have a client who literally Tuesday said, I had to fire my own sister. His sister worked for his company. He said, I had to fire her. And, there was a little bit of unrest over that, but I just could not have her in this company that I've built. And I gave her a shot, and I'll still try to help her find another job outside of my company. But the geography, or I've had clients who have said, again, well, the girl I mentioned earlier today, moving away from her family. Or I had a woman just this week who said, I need to walk away from my toxic son. And so she's moving from wherever she is, Arizona or whatever it is, she's moving to actually my home state of Minnesota. So
Right.
people, even if, and she wasn't cutting her son completely out of her life, but because the son had become, somewhat abusive in his words and so on, she created geography. So there are ways to create some distance without a total breach.
Right.
But if you don't create that distance, and there are some times when, no matter how hard it is to do that, of reducing the impact or walking away from entirely, no matter what we think the price is, there are times when the universe drives us to do things that we think unthinkable, and we think it is so bad it's a non-solution. But very often the universe takes us through the hardest of things, forces us to make the ugliest of decisions, trusting that somehow maybe this will work out. And only with time do we see that it does work out, and that flowers grow through the cracks, and that beautiful things happen even out after the hardest, ugliest of decisions. But at the very least, to answer your question, at the very least, creating some measure of room so that your soul can breathe again. Otherwise, you're just eating shit for this other person, and nobody is expected to live that way.
You know, it's funny. You just gave me confirmation in my own life, because I moved back to Boston from Atlanta, and it was like sort of the last, almost like the last cut from, you know, my marriage. You know, just not being a mile and a half away, and it, you know.
What? And I'm just curious, Steph. I gotta ask, what was it that up to that point made you so afraid of cutting that last cord? Was it that, gee, now it's done and my soul grieves that my marriage didn't end the way I wanted it to? Was it moving away from and feeling a sense of loss at losing the people and places? What was it about that last cord that made it the last cord? Why wasn't that the third or the 33rd cord? Why was that the last one?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you know, I had kids. So I couldn't leave the state with my kids, and leaving them, you know, when they were younger would not have worked for me. I would not have wanted to do that. But I had been sort of, I say I manifested coming back home for years. Like I wanted to come back home, but I was afraid. I was afraid.
What were you most afraid of?
Well,
what were you most afraid of is sort of what I'm getting.
You know, now that I'm away from it, it's silly, but I was afraid of him.
Okay.
You know what? Like, look, thinking like, what is he going to do? Like, you know, but I was afraid of him. I was afraid of his, what he verbally assaulted me. He's, you know, gaslighter and bully. And I was afraid of it. I was afraid that he was going to tell the kids bad things about me, or he was going to get on Facebook and tell people. And the last run-in I had with them right after I moved, I go, tell anybody you want. Tell everybody I'm a bad mother. I don't care. I don't get. I go.
And what is it? And okay, and that's the moment. What is it that brought you to that moment? Because I think listeners are benefiting from this story right here. What is it that brought you to the moment that enabled you to do the thing that would have been unthinkable a week or a year earlier?
You know what it was? I let go of what the kids were going to think if he told them something. I had to let go of them, you know, let go of them and be and say, you know what, tell them whatever you want. These kids are coming with me on the holidays. I don't care. Do whatever you want. Tell the world, get on Facebook, call your friends, call everybody you want, do whatever. But this is what's going on. And that was it. And I had to let go of the thought that people were going to think badly about me.
That is it. Steph, you absolutely nailed it. That when the frustration, the anger, the pain, the whatever it might be gets so bad, we step over that last fear. And for so many people, the biggest fear in life, the thing that keeps them from expressing that true self that we talked about, from expressing it on the outside, the biggest thing that keeps them from doing that is the fear of what people will think. Most specifically, the fear of whoever the most powerful people are in their lives will think. And when we've had kids, our feelings towards our kids, but our kids' feelings towards us have a very big influence on who we are. And it's very easy to fear them disliking me.
Yeah.
Fear them disapproving, or fear anyone disapproving. And that's what keeps people from following their true self inside. Fear of what people will say, fear of what people will think. But once the pain gets bad enough, we sort of skip over that. It's like, I don't even care anymore. Say what you want. I got to do what I got to do. And your story is brilliant. I love that story because that's so verbally and perfectly encapsulates what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And the thing is I was judged. Now, remember, I'm Sicilian. I'm from a very tight-knit Sicilian background with friends, and all of us were moms and all of that. And I was judged, and I judged that I left my kids. I was judged, and I had to say, sorry,
go ahead.
No, I just had to say, you know what? I had to do what was best for me because I was dying.
Yes. And Steph, you just raised a really interesting thing. in moving from Minnesota out to, years and years in California, and then, moving my business across country to Manhattan and New York, a lot of Italian families here. And my girlfriend, big Italian family, and I love them all. They're great people, and they're so loud. And we don't have carpeting in our house. It's hardwood floors.
Yeah.
So the sound of all these wild Italians, it's like, oh, wow, stimulus overload. I need to take like a week-long nap. But I come from a big family too, and a very loud family as well. So it wasn't too shocking, but we had carpeting. But my point is this. I call it sort of the curse of the big family, but it's not unique to big families. It can happen in any family.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is in big families is everybody's got an opinion. And the louder it is, and the more it's been okayed by generations to ram it down your throat, the more difficult it is for that young person to hear their own voice, because they got the voice of Auntie Maria, and they got the voice of Auntie, Jelaine, and they've got the voice of Auntie so-and-so, and uncles and cousins. They can't hear their own voice.
Yeah.
And it's not just big families. It can be little families where there are dominating people ramming their truth down your throat like a little baby bird in a nest, waiting for the worm, except it's not a worm. It's this giant brick of everything you should be and should do, and you should listen to me. And what rises up is my own voice from the soul, and it meets that voice of all the shit that's expected of me being rammed down my throat. And where those two meet, the voice of my authentic self, the voice of my soul, and the voice of society and family, everyone with the big mouth, and it comes and they meet and they grate, and pain in the chest, or maybe it's up here, or maybe it's down there. But do you know how earthquakes out here are happen because of shifting in tectonic plates below the Earth's surface?
Right.
It's the same thing in our personal lives, that you've got these tectonic plates of my own, the voice of my soul, and the voice being rammed down my throat, rubbing against each other. And it creates problems in my body, but it creates problems. Everything out here reverberates with the grating and the pounding of my soul trying to express itself, yet my feeling I have to eat their voices. I have to eat their opinions. I have to be who they want me to be. And that's why this young girl this morning, or anybody, having the courage to say, fuck that. Having the courage to say no.
Yeah.
And to push all those voices back
Mm-hmm.
at potential loss of family, friends, wealth, career, whatever, and to express the self is this monumental act of courage. And it's not a one-time thing, it's a day in and day out thing, but it does get easier. But your point about the family, in your case, the Italian family, in my case, the Swedish family, or whatever, or any family where there's a lot of opinions and there's a fear of retribution. There's a fear of being criticized or undermined, or being told, oh, that's just stupid, or being asked, are you sure, or all that crap. Any family of any size where that happens, it chokes the soul of that child, and it's just an ugly thing, and that is the precursor for all the problems that come later.
It's amazing. And for people who are Don Miguel fans, he calls it the lies of domestication.
Yes, love it.
Yeah. And so that's, it's what we're told about ourselves and our world by everybody around us that really doesn't serve us.
That's right. And that's why, Steph, to that point, that's why it's not enough. It's clearing the pain that's blocking the voice of my soul, pulling out all the pain, all the fears, all the anxieties. That's half the process. Getting the feelings out, all the sadness and all the anger and the rage, those have to come out. But the other piece, to your point, and as I talk about in my books, is the lies, or what I call the beliefs that get pressed inside of us. Those beliefs have to come out and be looked at. As my mother always said, naming the beast is half the problem. Go down and articulate what I've been taught about myself, not just explicitly, but implicitly, about myself, about the life, about the world. And once we look at those and ask ourselves the question, is this what I value though? Do I agree with what's been pressed into me? And if not, then it's the courage to push it out. So it's a twofold experience. It's getting the emotional, the physical release of the pain out. And that's very critical. And that's how we decharge those memories. But it's also pulling out the beliefs and articulating them. So it's not just enough. I have a client who says, gosh, Sven, when I'm getting so anxious and so forth from my company and so forth, I'll put on my, running shoes at lunch, and I'll take the elevator down and I'll go run, the East Side Highway or whatever. And then I come back and I just feel like relaxing and I can do my work. Well, getting that physical release of the anxiety is only part of the problem. Or doing yoga, and yoga can stimulate great epiphanies. I don't dispute it. I have a mad respect for yoga. I don't do it, but I have mad respect for it.
Right.
But it's that physical release, but you still have to have words. It's been said that you never know what you truly think until you're forced to codify your thinking, until you're forced to either write it down or speak it. Because until it's out of us, it's just tumbling around in our head, just tumbling and tumbling, and we never have clarity. And so, yes, it's both of those things, getting the physical energy out and giving words to what actually happened.
So, Sven, I have two last questions for you. One is, and I'm sort of going to preface this, the way I talk to my clients about how to even recognize what those beliefs are, I ask them to start asking themselves questions like, why do I feel this way? What, and I think I saw a TikTok that you did on that, and I was like, oh, I do the same thing. Yep. We're pretty much in line. So I think that because sometimes we have these beliefs and we don't even know they're there. But I think the only way to recognize it is when we're uncomfortable in our lives. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. You would never question what your beliefs are if things are flowing along fine. Obviously, everything's fine. It's just that in most cases, with most people, it's not always fine. And the question is whether you're going to look to try to find the root cause. Because until you find the root of the problem, you're just creating half solutions. And those will never last, right? And so, yeah, it requires going down inside and finding what it is. And I'm a big believer in journaling, huge believer in journaling. Yes. My mother, my followers have heard me say it a million times. She started me when I was 13, but asking the deep questions with it. And to your point, the question why? Well, why do I feel this way today? Well, it's because Peter said blah, 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 blah. But why would that trigger me? Why did Peter's words trigger me? It's like, oh, shit. Because I remember, my brother Steve saying that sort of crap to me all my years growing up. Well, why did it bother me then? Well, because Steve was basically saying he didn't love me. And well, why did that bother me so much? Because I love Steve. I just wanted to be with him. So now I'm tracking. I'm going deeper. And why is really such the perfect question for that, or how come and so forth. But it's tracking everything back, finding those root causes, finding like where you're having an epiphany where it's like, oh, wow, that's it. It's those epiphanies, giving words to it. But I'm a big believer in journaling. Counseling, good counseling can have the same effect. Or a dear friend who can not just listen and be present, but also ask deeper questions. Well, what was that really about? We've all had a friend or two like that in life who's like poking and probing. They're just asking their own curiosity. And that's what it really is. I always tell clients, I don't have a method that I follow per se. I've developed a method over the last 25 years, but it's when I'm in counseling, I'm just following my own curiosity. And what I'm looking for are, to use an old math term, I was a math major in college, incongruencies, things that just feel off.
Right.
So I've got a client that says they want X, Y, or Z, but here they are doing J, L, and Q. It's just like, and you can do J, L, and Q. It's your life. Do whatever the hell you want. But you're saying this, but doing this. And so then I'm asking the questions. Well, why is that? So you really want it, but you're afraid to do that, or you're feeling pressured or whatever. But it's going deeper and looking just in your own curiosity. Well, why do I feel that way? Well, this doesn't make sense. I got to figure it out. And journaling, you have the power. You don't have to pay a penny to anyone. You can do it yourself. It just takes a little longer. But I do for a lot of people. I made the book that I made. I have these video courses. The young people love the video courses because they prefer those over reading. But it's my whole book encapsulated into these video courses. And I just did this for people who can't afford my counseling. But it takes you through the questions to ask. It presents the issues and the insights. And then I have exercises for journaling and meditation. Because the bottom line is, this shit doesn't magically heal itself. The afflictions of your soul don't magically heal themselves. And it's not just enough to allow the pain out. That's a huge part of it. But you have to do the work of articulating where this came from and finding the sources. And it's not as hard or intimidating as it may sound. It can be done. But that's where the real joy is. And ultimately bring it all the way back to where we started. in the way I believe, what I believe a badass to be truly be, is not somebody who's all tough guy and putting on the bravado. When I grew up around guys, and I grew up in sports and military and shit, it's just like, that's so easy. And the people, and the women too, you know, the tough girls, oh, I'm a tough girl. And being around New York, it's like, everybody's tough. I'm scared of the women, you know, especially the Italians. And my girlfriend is half Sicilian and half from Positano. And she's like, whoa, these are some powerful women. And I love it. I love it. Don't get me wrong. But being a badass isn't about being tough and angry and I'm badass all the time. The real badasses are the ones whose default card is just kindness. It's just being normal. And they have that tool in their tool belt. They have a hammer in their tool belt. They can come down with the hammer. All right. But their default is just kindness. In other words, they go from being mush on the inside with a hard outer shell to knowing their strength and bedrock on the inside and feeling kind, being soft on the outside. They feel okay just being normal and kind. They can go to that if they need to, but their default is just kindness because they're not afraid anymore of what people think. They're not afraid of you seeing my inner mush because they found themselves and they love themselves. So being badass is ultimately, especially from a guy perspective, I get so many guys who come to me for counseling. It's like, I want to, you know, doing the tough guy thing. And it's like, it's not that. The tough guy thing is you basically, society has said this is what a tough guy is, and you're being all tough and manly and men don't cry and all that shit. And to me, it's just the opposite. I cry whenever the hell I want to. I'm such a badass. My clients are such badasses that they don't give a shit what anybody says, and they feel what they feel in the moment. They say what they believe in the moment. They're compassionate yet strong. To be a badass is just to be you without any fears anymore. Just to be you. That's a badass. Where no one else is setting the definitions of what you should be for your life, where you are, where you're in communion with your own soul. That to me is a badass because they're just being their own truth. And somebody living in that state is always the most compassionate person, always the kindest person, and always the strongest person when work has to be done. So that to me is what a badass is.
That's it. I love it. So I'm definitely getting your Badass Jesus book because that's my kind of God.
Right on.
But I love that. So I have one last question. You are hosting a dinner. There's 8 chairs at the table. Your chair is 1. What 7 people from across all times would you have at your table?
Oh, gosh. A couple of easy ones. I got to have Mozart. Classical music, you know, season tickets to the symphony. Mozart, Martin Luther King Jr., Joseph Campbell. Oh gosh, part of me wants to say Nureyev, the great dancer. Who would I say? Oh gosh, the 5 of us. Oh my gosh, come on, William Shakespeare. I gotta have him. I don't understand a word he says because it's like, who can speak that iambic pentameter and all that in his sonnets? But it's just the mind, to have that mind there. And then I got to say something like, oh gosh. And it's not coming to me and I'm going to kick myself later, but I have 1 or 2 like old school 40s actresses just for that panache, that class, you know. And then I got to bring Karen, and I suppose, who do I know that would enjoy it most? That I would enjoy laughing with the most, my dear, dear, dear friend and author, Jay. And Jay Bland, you don't know him. But anyway, that's my group. And good food, lots of seafood, lots of pasta, lots of red wine, and lots of bourbon.
I love it. That's great. So how can everybody find you?
My TikTok is Badass Counseling. And as you've already said, you know, it's been viral and it's crazy. And but that's where I'm posting the most. It's 59-second quick shots. You can also find me on Instagram where I'm posting those same 59-second ones, and it's not a minute, even though they say it is. But I also do some long form stuff. I have some other long form stuff when I'm really wanting to explain stuff. I did one on victims about a week and a half ago. I had a short version, but over on Instagram, I expanded a bit more because it's such a, you know, it required more. And then my website, all of my books are there, badasscounseling.com. My latest book, There's a Hole in My Love Cup. It's been out on ebook. It's sold out on paperback, but my publisher has assured me that it's going to be out in paperback this week. And that's all of my counseling collapsed into one. And then all the usual things, Facebook, you know, whatever else, all of the other ones, LinkedIn, I know, and so forth.
I know. Just regular across the board. And you offer, you know, you have your, you know, what you your services, but
Yep.
you also offer a course for people that don't want to, that are not ready for one-on-one,
That's right.
And you're
That's
versatile.
right.
I'm
On
sorry.
my website, the tab is DIY, Do It Yourself Badass.
Right.
And there are a bunch of different video courses in there. There's one on relationships. There's Healing the Soul and Unleashing Your Greatness. That's my book in there. And then there are different packages of what you can choose for those and so forth. So everything's there. And if not, if you don't want to pay, and my older brothers would say, I ain't paying shit because you ain't got nothing to say, boy. So for those who don't want to pay, just go to the TikToks. It's easy and it's fun.
Right.
And plus, you get all the funny stuff when I'm getting too serious. You can scroll on to something funny.
I know it's awesome. I love it. So, will you come back sometime?
I'd love to. My
God,
Steph.
you've been such a pleasure.
I love your questions, Steph. I love your questions.
I'm so glad. You know what? You're the best, and I'm so honored to have you here, and it's been fun. So, I hope you'll come back.
I will. Thank you for the opportunity. You have a great show.
All righty, everybody. Okay, so take a risk, be vulnerable, share your heart and love always. Know I love you all. Wishing you love, balance, and peace. Ciao, ciao, baby. I love you. I do. Thanks for tuning in to the Just Steph Show. I really care about you, your happiness, and helping you make great choices for your life. So tune in next week for more wisdom from me. In the meantime, follow me on my Just Steph Facebook page, on Twitter at Steph Palermo. My Instagram account is JustSteph1, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Steph Palermo. See you next week. Ciao.